it, as a process being suggested to women, should be as rare as normal births have become today. And once induction does become a rare phenomena, normal births will go higher, just the way they were a few decades ago. This is the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that brings us alive, that burns myths and opens a channel of authentic natural birth stories. This show debunks the many myths of the medicalized births, showcases the plethora of choices a pregnant couple can make to embark on their empowered birth journey. I'm Divya Kapoor, a certified birth and lactation counselor and an aspiring traditional birth attendant. Let's get the flames blazing high. Hello, fellas. Today's episode is about inductions being the epidemic of the birth world. If you are in India or even in the world, you would have noticed every second person around you is diagnosed at 36 weeks onwards with an issue in an otherwise healthy pregnancy, and they are either asked to be induced or undergo a surgery, which is what this episode is all about. Why such high number of inductions? We will discuss what are inductions, what they do to your body. What is the guideline really? Moving forward, I am thinking of bringing an expert, a fellow birth worker, to talk about it in far more detail than this episode is to cover. Also, I'm going to share about my traditional midwifery aka birth keepers training, where I was at in August when 3 episodes went missing on the podcast in Kolkata, Mayapur. I was in Kolkata training with the senior midwife Krishna Lolia. She is an ISKCON devotee, a traditional Hawaiian midwife with over 50 years of experience, just 4 transfers for cesarean. And she's really sweet, fierce, and a wonderful person. I will soon have her on the podcasts and capture her insights. I did record an episode with her, but due to some technical reasons, it never got saved. I lost it eventually. Kolkata, Mayapur. This place is the ISKCON capital. It is India's headquarters for ISKCON, and it is some 150 kilometers from Kolkata. It's a small, beautiful village. I've been there thrice now. One, I was in March, the other time in June, and the last and longest I was there was in August. So in March, what really happened was this was my first meetup with KL. It was not for training. It was about a few birth workers going to meet her, and she was fresh back from Australia. And the highlight of the trip was the 3-hour drive to reach Mayapur from Kolkata airport. But oh no, that was not the highlight. We didn't even take the flight that time. We took the train from Delhi. We booked a train ticket, and the train was late by some 10-12 hours. And I wanted to go by the train just to have my daughter experience traveling by a train. And she's never traveled before by a train. So I was really excited. And it was a beautiful journey. It was not as taxing even when it was really late. But what happened after was we took another train, a local train from Kolkata to Mayapur, which usually takes 3 hours to take us. But that train, because of the construction going on, took us another 6 hours to reach Mayapur. And we reached Mayapur at some 12 in the night, and KL welcomed us, waiting for us at the entrance. It was a village. Like, I've actually felt I've just landed in a village. But as soon as the next morning I got to see the place, it was surreal. It has a beautiful lush green landscape, slow village style living, which took me back to the time at my grandparents' place where I used to live as a child. I spent a considerable amount of time, and there was no television. We would sit outside and talk and greet all the elderly. We would address them as Nana and Nani, which is grandma and grandpa. The scent of the trees, the noise of the mill, the roaring of the jackals in the night, all the same, very similar to what I experienced in my childhood. So it was dreamlike. And another thing very spectacular about Mayapur is that It has sudden ear-splitting storms. All of a sudden, you'd have a storm. It would be followed by splendid rains, the music of it all pouring down, the wet earth and the scent. Ah, it's beautiful. You would be sweating in the afternoon, really needing gumsha, as everybody calls it there, really needing a handkerchief all the time to wipe your face, and then all of a sudden you'd be having chills in the night because it has cooled down so suddenly. So the first visit in March was where we all collected. We all had took our queries with us. We discussed them with KL. It was an educational trip. KL at that time was hosting these pregnancy support groups at her place, wherein pregnant mothers and new mothers come together. They discuss everything about parenthood, birth, the other mother's experiences, herbal remedies, what worked for someone else, how did they cope up with things, that kind of a community support group. And in that support group, my daughter and another pregnant mother's daughter were of the same age, and they got together. They would play, and she was pregnant with her second. And in one of these meetings, my girl got into a fight with that girl, and I helped work them out. And that mother, was working with Gail for her pregnancy and birth. And then Gail observed me watching her, and how I tried to bring down the air when the children were fighting, and how I observed everything. And she subtly brought this up that, do you want to be at her birth as a trainee? Do you want to learn? And I was like, yes. But I was in disbelief. Although I said yes, but I was in disbelief because I was already wishing on something like that. I was looking up courses to be a midwife. How do I enroll in it? How do I work this up? And there it was an opportunity to be at a birth right in front of me, and in the most traditional, in the most authentic way as possible. So yeah, I what really happened was, after that I came back, and the next few months in Delhi I kept in touch with KL, checking up on the mother. And then after a few months, I think 2 months later, KL mentioned that she's starting a cohort of midwifery trainees, and she's going to have an educational training apprenticeship program, which is one of a kind, where you get to be at births and learn practically. As you practice, as you learn, alongside sessions where theoretical sessions happen. So I was really excited. I was like, yes, now this seems more real. And I jumped on it and was planning to see how to go, whether take my daughter or leave her back, how to work things around. And I was still not sure whether that mother was in labor and how to really work it out. And then one of these days I thought, maybe this mother has not given birth, and I've been very occupied. I have not been able to make a plan to go. Maybe she was, to my calculation, around 38, 39 weeks. And I had a feeling that maybe she's waiting for me, or her labor is waiting for me to begin. And then I spoke to Care and I said, at a very short notice, I think I want to come, and I can only plan for the next 10 days, not more than that, because my husband and I decided I'd leave my daughter behind and I'd go on my own. And then I went, and Care invited me to be at her place and to live with her, which is an incredible thing that happened, and indeed, that time with her yielded like one I could learn with her on the go through stories. And that is her style of teaching. She teaches by a method called talk stories, just the indigenous tribal way of teaching. And so one afternoon, I reached her. I was sitting by her side. I got to her, and she was already attending to an official. She was in a meeting, and she made me very comfortable. We had lunch, and then we had dinner and spoke about what's ahead, and hoping that there's a birth to attend now that I've come without any signs of any birth, just hoping that the mother at 38, 39 weeks goes into labor. And then we bid each other good night. There you go off to sleep some 7:30 or 8 earlier than usual for the cities. And after an hour of we had bid each other good night, she came back and told me, Divya, this mother has begun mild contractions and her water has broken. And since she is a second time mother, it could be any time. She asked me to take out a pair of clothes and keep them in a bag, some supplies, and be ready to be called in any time. And I was very nervous and excited. My first birth, and wow. And it was the very day I reached KL, and it was a full moon. It was the full moon, and I was, I was very different. I was, I was excited and nervous, and I was trying to keep it low. If you look at me in those situations, you will not be able to make out how excited I can be for these things. So yeah, next morning we were called in. We observed the mother. She was smiling. She was walking around. She was taking care of everybody at her house. She had family to cook and take care of other things, but she was very much present managing the house. And soon by the afternoon, she was in active labor. Not really afternoon, late morning, she was in active labor. And within 4 hours, the baby was born. Baby girl was born. And what did I do in all the birth? I supported the mother. I massaged her. But pretty much the mother was on her own because she didn't like being touched in labor. She didn't like a particular way. She didn't want to change any position. She just wanted to be her. She just wanted to be in her very cozy space. And this was an undisturbed, unmedicated birth. And after it happened, and I saw the baby being born, which was later the mother told me, I was looking at your face. It was your first time. I was like, yeah, it was your first time. You were very different. I was like, I didn't notice. And when she told me, the way you looked very different when you were watching me, watching my baby come out. And I was like, yes, I was all focused to see and observe how the baby is being born. Because that's what you do as a midwife. You observe, you be there. Um, and later I came out of the room crying and overwhelmed, not by the birth. I didn't cry in the room, in the birth. I came out crying. When I say that, I mean I was out of the room, and after about an hour of realizing what just happened, I cried, thinking about my own birth, which was not a good experience, and overwhelmed. And I remember myself telling KL that this was such a boring birth. It was such a boring experience. And KL was like, this is how birth is. Birth can be boring, birth can be uneventful. And I was constantly in clashes about how we make it a high energy event, how we are trying to always make it more sensational. Something is gonna happen, something might go wrong, like we're always on the edge with it. But with this birth, nothing was on the edge. It was just as calm, beautiful, simple, straightforward as it could be. And KL was like that. You do hope that for all your births that they go simple and they go straightforward, and we don't want to complicate it. And whenever it does get complicated, it gets complicated for all the right reasons, and that has stayed with me. So I attended all the postnatal sessions with her, learned how to assess the mother and the baby right after birth, in more details postpartum, what are the things to watch out for, and it has definitely added on to my practice as a childbirth educator. Now that I've seen so many things, I am far more confident in and have a bigger scale when I mentor my mothers on how birth and how things happen. So my scale definitely has gone bigger with all these experiences. And just like that, soon 10 days passed. I came back to Delhi with a promise that I'll go back. So this was my second visit, and this was in June. Then after that, I had this on my mind, like everything just kept, I kept thinking that it's going to be in August. I'm going to go to her in August. And then she called me in the middle of July, and she said that I suspect that there is a breech baby and the baby could be born at any time. It's 37 weeks plus. And do you want to be at this birth? I was like, yes, but I don't know. I was already with a mother for whom I was to be a doula. And her birth was in early August, like the EDD was early August. And I was like, okay, as soon as, I'm done with this mother, not really saying done with this mother, as soon as the mother births a baby and I'm done with this work, I will plan and come. And meanwhile, I had already thought that this time I'm going to go longer. I'm going to go at least for a month because KL had more mothers who were delivering in August, at least 3 or 4 around the same time. And I was like, okay, I want to be at as many births as I can. And I want to go at together because it's a lot of work to travel, including the expenses and the 3-hour drive from Kolkata airport to Mayapur is the highlight. That's the only thing that I feel is taxing of the entire experience. Other than that, everything is just incredibly fast forward. It has fast forwarded my learning to an extent that I can't even explain. So then the mother did give birth end of July, 25th onwards, someday, I don't even remember when it was. And then I was like, yes, this time I'm gonna go and I'm plan. I've already spoken to my parents that they're gonna be with me if they would like to travel with me, and they can explore a new place and be there for almost a month. And I'll take my daughter with me because I'm going for a month. That's how we planned, and everybody was on board. I booked my tickets. 31st of July, I was in Kolkata, and it was full moon. And a mother went into labor the very first day. Thereon began another journey of a lot of prenatals, learning how to palpate the baby, doing a lot, urine tests and other midwifery checks, and learning how to work and think and be like a midwife in all these prenatal sessions. And I attended 4 more births there, then the postnatals, and again, as a lactation counselor, the power of that expertise of my work always came in handy, and Gail just threw me into it, and she stepped back and saw me work with mothers, especially on lactation issues. So it was a great platform like that as well. And my daughter enjoyed the new place, enjoyed the different nationalities, the people from different nationalities, and my parents loved, and my mother is from a village, so she loved the place in all its beauty and slowness and on its earthiness, and they both enjoyed it as much as they've told me. And it was a great help. All of this kind of came together, and instead of 4 weeks, I had to stay for 3 weeks. Somehow my husband was really missing me, and he kept saying, come back. And I was like, no, I want to be at births. And then I was like, maybe just another date kept coming to my mind, 25th. Maybe I can leave on 25th. And I got to attend another birth on 23rd. So all the births that were planned in August, early August, were being considered to be in my kitty, and I could attend all of them. And it was an incredible experience with the sessions, attending them personally, and meeting other trainee midwives and making friends, and amazing. So that was it. That was my journey. And if any of you are interested to be a midwife and want to know about this cohort and want to join, you can absolutely email me, get in touch with me on my website. And now on to the topic of the podcast. Before I even begin the topic of the podcast, I want to tell you that in all these births, I've attended 6 births so far, and in none of these births, any of the mothers were induced. Some even went beyond 40 weeks, some were around 38 weeks, and none of them were induced. No tests were done towards the end of it to find out if there is an issue, because if we do too many tests, like Kel says, we are going to find an issue that can be used as our hook. And all of these mothers went on to have beautiful births. There was one that was transferred, but all the others were normal births. natural births, I would say, unmedicated, undisturbed births. And what do I mean when I say none of these mothers were induced? What is induction? Induction is a very common practice, especially in the hospitals in India now. And it should not be common at all, but it is a process which is used to commence, that is, start labor pains before natural spontaneous labor begins on its own, which can be around 38 weeks. And a lot of first time mothers, it can go beyond 40 weeks. It is done artificially using a medicine, gel, or any other drug, IV. And there are a lot of other methods of doing it as well, physical methods, but none of them are encouraged in the hospital setting. A lot of hospital settings today in India are doing drugs based inductions. So, having said that, inductions do not encourage a normal birth. That's a huge myth out there that, okay, since I am in some sort of a risk situation, they will do an induction, and that by doing an induction, I'm being given a chance at normal birth. Remember, induction does not encourage a normal birth. The pathways of a normal birth, a natural birth, are different than the pathway that the body goes into, the process of labor that the body goes into for an induced birth. Yes, sometimes an induction can lead to a normal birth, and those chances are there, but you have to really understand a lot of risks that inductions have before saying yes to it. But before that, let us see what WHO says about induction. So, WHO has a 48-page booklet that is directed to us healthcare workers, and which includes gynecologists and OBs, and that says there are two recommendations in it. The first one says induction of labor is recommended for women who are known with certainty to have reached 41 weeks, which means equal to 41 weeks or plus 7 days, up to 7 days of gestation. The other recommendation we'll go to. But let us understand what the first one says. It says with certainty if the mother has reached 41 weeks, which can be just 41 weeks or plus 7 days as well. How do we realize or how do we assess that you have reached your EDD or your due date? Oftentimes, when the scan is done in the beginning, there is a different estimated due date given to you, and usually towards the end of the pregnancy, it moves to another date. Often, the last scans show a revised EDD, that is, moving your due date to another date, telling you that your previously estimated due date was wrong. And anyway, when you look up the episode on what are due dates and what do they mean, which is there on the list of episodes on this podcast, you'll learn more about them. In nutshell, your due date is a guess. It's always a guess. And if anybody, and it's usually in India, it's not even done understanding the frequency of your cycles. So if the frequency of your cycles are far apart, that means one period comes after a certain distance, which is longer and more than sometimes 28, 22 days, then it is very normal for you to go into labor after 40 weeks, which is very normal. Waiting for labor has its preference for normal birth. So in that case, when we say certainty means here that even with your revised scans, your gestational date, even if it has moved, we are seeing the new date and not saying you have a small baby for your first estimated due date, which is what is happening. So yes, with certainty, and nobody can say with certainty, which means induction of labor in most cases is and should not be recommended. Waiting for labor has its preference for normal birth. Now, induction is not a risk-free method or a risk-free procedure. Induction has a lot of risks, and once you are induced, doctors will not let you go back home. They will not let you labor at home. They are going to put you on a timeline because they have to keep assessing you, because they have now intervened in the natural process of labor, and they know that the mother and the baby can at any time be in distress after induction. So they do have to assess. So let's read first paper on what it says about the risks of inductions. So the first risk of induction, that this research papers with doctors and professors from Pennsylvania, they say that induction of labor increases your chances of a surgical birth fairly more than spontaneous labor. That is a labor beginning on its own. So, this is a suggestion and it should be made with caution. That means any suggestion to be induced should be made with a caution, clearly telling you that you can go into a surgery because you were induced. The objective of this research paper that says term induction of labor and risk of cesarean delivery by parity says that to evaluate the risk of cesarean delivery among both nulliparous is first-time mothers, and multiparous women, which means women who have given birth more than once, undergoing a term induction of labor compared to women that present in spontaneous labor at term. And what does the conclusion say? The conclusion says the increased risk of cesarean in women undergoing an induction is present, regardless of parity and indication for induction. Women who were induced for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons will have an increased risk of cesarean, regardless of parity, whether the first time or the second time. And this should be taken into account when counseling women regarding risks of induction, regardless of parity. So anybody telling you that we are giving you a chance at normal birth by inducing you should think twice at what they are telling you, because this is wrong information. This is not giving you correct information, even when it comes to informed decision making. And if you do not know what informed decision making is, please go to another episode on the podcast, What Are Informed Decisions? And I will lay down these episodes in the show notes for you to go back to. And what are the other risks of induction? Labor pain on an induction is higher. In your spontaneous labor, your body gives you a chance to actually relax between contractions. With induced labor, your contractions are one on top of the other, and they're extremely excruciating, painful. But with induction, your natural painkillers do not work the way they work in spontaneous labor. So it is really more painful to be induced for a normal birth. Inductions can cause baby distress. Sometimes it blows my mind that induction is recommended for a baby in distress. Induction makes a baby pass meconium. And if you think sometimes, okay, my baby passed meconium, you have to think whether you were induced or not. Induction can make a mother breathless. Induction may not work sometimes. It may not even trigger labor sometimes. If your body and the baby are not ready and it was not the time for them to be born, if the body wanted more time for the baby to grow, your body will not go into labor. And for assessing that, a Bishop score is done. And without a Bishop score that says you are okay to be induced and you have fairly a more chance of an induction working for you, randomly everybody should not be induced. And that's a guideline. Induction can slow dilation, which can later be diagnosed as failure to progress, which is a failure of induction really, and not your progress or your body's progress. So induction does have a high failure rate, primarily because of the reason that it is being offered to every other mother in India. And that in itself is something we need to think about. Despite all these risks, induction is thrown around like a candy. Induction is not for everyone, and induction should be suggested with its own caution. And here is another interesting document, which is the document from Indian Obstetrics. And the guidelines say that induction of labor should be performed only for a specific medical or obstetric indication. Expected benefits of shortening the duration of pregnancy should outweigh the potential harms from continuation of pregnancy with no contraindications of vaginal delivery. And then the last point says that induction of labor should be done after obtaining informed written consent just for induction. And this is the Indian Obstetrics Guidelines. Now go back and think about all the women you know, all your friends, sisters, family, relatives. How many of them were asked, explained, all the benefits, risks, and the future indications of induction, and then were made to sign an informed written consent that they are the ones going for it and not blindly following their doctors. And this is where the second recommendation from WHO comes in. Routine induction of labor for women with uncomplicated pregnancies at less than 41 weeks is not recommended. And it is being given routinely to every second mother in India. You can find this document and download it from my website, the WHO's guidelines. I'll put it up there and put the link in the show notes. And then when you think about it, you'll realize that maybe more than 90% of the people you know have been caused into an induction. And when you see that, and with all this information that you've just heard, maybe you want to ask yourself, is there something wrong? That the bodies that protected and nurtured the baby suddenly became its enemy? That our mothers and our grandmothers had some other superpowers that they were able to go into labor, and the new generation is not able to go into labor? And one of the primary questions to ask is how our mothers from the previous generations were never asked to sit on a timeline or a date for their babies. They would not even remember that they waited for their due date or etc. They never timed their pregnancies. They just waited and believed, because everybody did that and everybody had normal births. Now everybody has surgical births, and we are still not questioning the wrong practices we are doing in obstetrics and what is leading to what. And we are not even practicing the evidence-based guideline, which is another thing to think of. What I believe is induction is the first step to control your labor and birth. And it is okay to control your labor and birth when it is required and when it is in utmost safety for you or your baby. But it, as a process being suggested to women, should be as rare as normal births have become today. And once induction does become a rare phenomena, normal births will go higher, just the way they were a few decades ago. The thing is, with induction, everybody knows that the mother and the baby has increased risks. Everything that is being suggested today needs to be thought of, because it is all so twisted. It is not straightforward, and you cannot trust anything and everything that is thrown at you. Now I'm going to state a few other research papers for your personal study and work. And I do teach about inductions in my birth classes. And one of these papers that I do want to discuss right now, in short, is about failed inductions. And this paper about failed inductions comes from India. All of these people are from India who've done this research. It is India-based. Parvati Tripathi, Tapasi Pati, Prasana Baby, Susanta Kumar Mohapatra. All these people are professors of obstetrics, dean, and all of them are from gynecology department. And the abstract from this study says that induction of labor is being practiced widely as a routine procedure in every labor room. Its success and failure is difficult to predict before administration of the procedure. This study aimed to identify the predictors for failed induction by a 1-year observation of the procedure and its effect on labor outcome. The samples were selected, those who were admitted in the labor room in first stage of labor and induced by prostaglandin with indications of post-states, weak contraction, PROM and PIH. PROM is your water leaking before you've gone into labor. The study shows a failure rate of 50.5% with cesarean section, and a major reason for cesarean section were poor progress, fetal distress, cephalopelvic disproportion, oligohydramnios, and meconium straining. The predictors of failure were gravida, number of doses, and Bishop score. Though the prostaglandin is associated with success and failure, but its judicious use should be monitored and policy should be made to control the unopposed use in day-to-day practice. The conclusion here says that the failure rate of induction with cesarean section is rising day by day. But without proper sample selection and monitoring process for cervical dilation, it is difficult to draw a conclusion. Though it is understood that the labor induction is not a definite cause of cesarean section, still in this study, it is predicted that the gravidas status, number of doses, and Bishop score have influence in success of labor, which means you being a candidate for induction needs to be selective, which is what is not happening today. And now I will leave it to you to decide, do your research, and then go back to all those positive stories on the podcast that you've heard and check for yourself were any of those mothers induced at all. Thank you so much. Till then, take care, and I'll be back with another birth story next week. There is a field beyond fear, where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood, and freedom. Remember, you got the bar. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis.